15,000 years ago, in the depths of winter, wood was a luxury most couldn't afford. The great ice sheets had pushed the forests south, hundreds of miles away. What trees remained were buried under snow 10 feet deep, or claimed by other families long before you could reach them. The tundra stretched endlessly in every direction, frozen, windswept, beautiful in its harshness. So when your fire began to die, when the last splinter of precious wood turned to ash, you didn't panic, you didn't despair. You remembered. You remembered what your mother taught you, what her mother taught her. Knowledge passed down through generations, tested by 1,000 winters, proven by the simple fact that you were still alive to receive it. Our ancestors understood something we've mostly forgotten. Everything that once lived can burn again. The world provides if you know how to look, if you know how to listen. Bone is more than a skeleton. It's not just structure, not just the frame that held a living creature upright. It's a vessel. Those porous cavities you see when a bone breaks, they're filled with something precious, fat-rich marrow, dense with calories, dense with energy. And when you dry that bone by fire, when you give it time to release its moisture, it burns. Not like wood exactly, it burns hotter, it burns longer. A single mammoth femur, properly prepared, could warm a family for an entire night. Sometimes longer if you were careful, if you knew what you were doing. But first, you had to find it. This required a different kind of knowledge, not the kind you could write down, even if writing had existed. This was knowledge of the land, of animal behavior, of ice and water, and the subtle ways they interact. You had to know where the rivers run weak in autumn, where the current slows and swirls, where the ice forms thin and treacherous, beautiful and deadly, where a mammoth, driven by thirst or confusion or simple bad luck, might step through and fall, where the water is just deep enough to drown them, just cold enough to freeze them solid, before the saber-toothed cats and cave lions could strip the carcass clean. You had to pay attention, always, to everything. The wolves helped with this. They always did. People today think of wolves becoming dogs, think of domestication, think of humans conquering and controlling nature. But it wasn't like that. Not at all. The wolves weren't pets. They weren't servants. They were colleagues, partners in survival. They chose us as much as we chose them, maybe more. We had what they needed: weapons, sharp flint blades and stone-tipped spears that could break through hide and bone in ways their teeth couldn't. We could make fire, create warmth, preserve food. They had what we needed. Senses we could never match. They could smell a frozen carcass from 5 miles away, maybe more. They could hear things we couldn't, see in darkness that blinded us. They knew the land in ways we were still learning. So we traveled together, hunted together. On the coldest nights, their bodies formed a living wall against the wind that wanted to kill us. Their breath added warmth to the shelter. Their presence meant security, meant warning if the cave bears came too close. And in return, we shared our fire, our food, our protection. We learned their language of posture and sound. They learned ours. It wasn't dominance, it was partnership, mutual respect born from mutual need, the first alliance between species. And it saved us both. When you found the mammoth frozen and waiting, you approached with respect, with gratitude. This creature died, yes, but its death meant your life, your family's life. That deserved acknowledgement. That deserved reverence. The work was hard. Bone doesn't yield easily, especially when frozen solid. You used stone hand axes, heavy and sharp, to carefully separate the leg bones from the rest, the shoulder blades, the ribs, each one assessed for size, for the thickness of the marrow cavity, for how well it would burn. The fat was just as precious. That thick white layer under the hide, frozen solid, had to be cut away in careful chunks. Your hands ached from the cold. Your breath came in clouds, but you worked steadily because you knew what this meant. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was taken for granted. This was survival. Every ounce mattered. The journey home was long. The bones were heavy. But you carried them willingly because you knew what waited. You knew that tonight, for the first time in days, your family would be truly warm. Starting the fire required patience. The old fire was dying, barely embers, so you fed it carefully with the last fragments of dried grass, the last tiny pieces of wood, just enough to build a small, steady flame. Then came the test, the moment of trust in ancient knowledge. You placed the first mammoth bone onto the flame. It didn't catch immediately. Bone needs to dry first, needs the fire's heat to drive out the ice, the moisture. You waited, watched. The family gathered close, hoping, trusting. And then it caught. The marrow began to smoke, then to ignite. The flame grew brighter, hotter. A warmth you could actually feel spreading through the shelter, pushing back the cold that had been seeping through every gap. It worked. It always worked. Your ancestors had been right. The fat required different handling. You couldn't just throw it on the fire. That would be wasteful, would create smoke and sputtering and lose most of its value. Instead, you placed it in a shallow stone bowl near the fire's edge. Let it melt slowly. Render. As it liquefied, you took a length of dried grass, twisted it tight into a wick, and set it in the melted fat. One small flame, steady, bright. A lamp that would burn for 8 hours or more on a single handful of rendered mammoth fat. Light and heat from the same source. The same creature who died 2 weeks ago, now giving you warmth, giving you light, giving you life. This is what survival meant in that time. Not conquest, not dominance over nature, not bending the world to your will through force, but attention, deep, patient attention to how the world actually works, to the patterns, to the gifts hidden inside what others might see as refuse. It meant understanding that death feeds life, that the cycle continues, that the mammoth who fell through weak ice becomes the fire that saves a family, that nothing is truly separate, everything connected. They didn't fight winter. You can't win that fight. Winter is older than our species, stronger, more patient. Instead, they understood winter, prepared for it, respected it, knew its rhythms and its dangers and its small mercies. And in that respect, in that understanding, they found a way to endure. Night after night, season after season, generation after generation. The knowledge was passed down not through writing, not through formal teaching, but through doing. Through a child watching their parents work. Through small hands learning to hold the stone blade correctly. Through mistakes made and corrected. Through the quiet satisfaction of a fire burning warm while the wind howled outside. This was education. Real education. The kind that kept people alive. 15,000 years later, we've forgotten most of this. We've forgotten what bone can do. We've forgotten how to read the land for frozen carcasses. We've forgotten the language of wolves, the partnership that made us human. We've gained so much, but we've lost something too. A kind of attention, a kind of patience, a kind of respect for the world that doesn't bend to our convenience, but the fire still burns. In shelters and caves in places we'll never find, in the archaeological record, in the bones we dig up and study and wonder about. And in it, if you look closely, if you pay attention the way our ancestors did, you can still see who we used to be. You can still see the wisdom that carried us through the coldest nights our species has ever known. You can still see the partnership with wolves that changed both of us forever. You can still see the careful hands processing mammoth bones, passing knowledge to the next generation, ensuring survival. And maybe, just maybe, you can still learn something about patience, about attention, about respect for the world that gives us everything we need. If we only know how to look, the fire still burns. It always has.